All right, boys and girls, so we're reading chapter 6 of the book Tornado. And a little warning, this chapter is going to be a bit emotional. So the tone of this chapter is filled with some emotion, but the emotion isn't going to be necessarily a happy emotion, okay? So a little warning here. Now, look at page 35. What's the chapter of chapter 6? Buddy. Very good. Okay. So, following along with me, please. Everyone, make sure you track where I'm reading. Okay, page 35. Pete opened the cellar doors, and we peered around him. But my mother turned her head away as if she didn't want to see. There was hail lying on the ground and broken limbs and leaves everywhere. So this is showing that there's definitely been some damage that has occurred already. No real damage, Pete called to my mother in a cheerful voice. My mother folded her hands over her heart. But I still don't like the look of that sky, Pete said. We better sit tight. He closed the door and he sat down. Do you remember anything else about the tornado? I prompted. I remember one time, this was the saddest day of my life. I hate to tell it. Please, I said. Well, my daddy and I went to town in the truck. Tornado was in the back. We hadn't planned on taking him, but as soon as my daddy lowered the tailgate, he jumped in like he knew what he was doing, so he got to go. My daddy and I parked the truck on the side of the street and went in the hardware store. Tornado stayed behind in the truck. We were gone about an hour. When we came back, my dad was loaded down with things, and I was carrying some paper bags filled with different sizes of nails. Okay, so you can picture both he and his dad have their hands full of some things that they had bought from the hardware store. And who's in the back of the truck? Tornado, right? So Tornado waited in the truck for them to come back. As we got closer to the truck, I heard a voice saying, "It's Buddy! It's Buddy!" in an excited way. "Mama, Papa, it's Buddy! Oh, Buddy, Buddy, I never thought I'd see you again, Buddy!" There was a family standing around the back of our truck, and one of the girls had climbed in. She had thrown her arms around Tornado's neck, and she was the one saying all of those buddies. I stopped where I was. To save my life, I couldn't have taken another step. The bags of nails fell from my hands onto the sidewalk. It was as if they had nailed me down. My daddy shifted his packages to rest a hand on my shoulder. He had warned me not to get too fond of the dog. "He's not yours yet," he had said over and over again, but both my parents had asked around and nobody knew who he belonged to. Well, I had gotten fond of him, more than fond. I loved that dog. He was mine. And now some girl was calling him Buddy. My dad held my shoulder tighter and said, "What's going on?" to a short man in suspenders. "Is this your truck?" the man asked. "It is." "This dog," the man said, "looks exactly like our dog, Buddy, that got blown away in the August tornado." Uh-oh. "That's about when we found him," my daddy admitted. "He came to us. He was in our yard." I had stopped breathing. Everybody had, except the short man in suspenders. "My girl carried on something awful when she found that dog was gone. She's always been real fond of him. Her grandfather gave him to her." "Well, my boy's gotten fond of the dog too," my daddy said. There was a long and terrible silence. Then the man in suspenders said, "Well, maybe I better get the police involved to settle this." "That won't be necessary," my daddy said. "You take the dog. He's rightfully yours. They let the tailgate down and took Tornado out of the back of our truck. They loaded him into theirs. Tornado didn't look real happy, but I couldn't do a thing to stop what was happening. I was still nailed to the concrete. My daddy put his packages in the truck and came back and picked up the nails for me. "Let's go home, Petey," he said, using the name he called me when I was little. And then he fell silent. Even my daddy couldn't find the good in this. The truck was pulling away from the curb. Tornado was in the back. I tried to get one last look at my dog, but my eyes were too full of tears. If my daddy had not helped me into the truck, I'd be standing there to this day. What do you think?
Very sad.
Isn't it sad? Will you go back and look at page 41? Look at the last two paragraphs. Will you point to the line that shows how emotional Pete was? And I'll come around and look to see if you found evidence that shows the emotion, shows the sadness that Pete felt. Stop it.